Now you may be wondering why I am even questioning VR. It's not that I don't believe in VR for flight sim. It is that it doesn't work in every scenario for every person. There are some good reasons not to fly in VR. I know, crazy. And those reasons I'm going to cover in this video. Hey guys, this is Dan from VR Flight World. If you're new to me and this channel, we talk about everything VR flight, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and bell notification so you don't miss out. So again, you might be surprised that VR Flight World is even talking about flying without VR. Well, the truth is that VR flight is amazing, however, there are times when it's better not to use VR. In this video, I will go over some of the reasons why you shouldn't fly in VR. However, at the end of the video, I'm going to go into the reasons why you would want to fly VR. So the first thing you have to think about is why you want to fly in VR. Are you going to be doing lots of VFR flying, or do you plan to do more IFR flights? If you plan to do only IFR flights, and if you're not familiar with IFR, so that'd be instrument flights, so you're flying in the clouds, then VR might be tricky for you. VR is absolutely amazing for VFR flight. However, it can have some drawbacks when it comes to IFR. For example, one of the drawbacks can be the fact that you can't see your hands, so it makes it difficult to keep track of information being provided by ATC. There's no way to write this down. Of course, there are a few workarounds that can make this a little easier, but nothing that beats having a piece of paper to write on. You can still lift your headset and yeah, you can write some stuff down, but it does become kind of a pain, and if you were doing lots of IFR flights and all you're looking at is clouds, then you might want to stick with the monitor. So if you're new to flight simulation and are just looking to get into this, then flying in VR might be a big step for you. Using VR adds an amazing level of depth to your flight sim experience. However, this comes with a lot of frustrations and a lot of headaches. Flying in VR is fairly a new concept, and as a VR flight sim enthusiast, you are constantly having to tweak things and adjust in order to get the best experience possible. So if you like this kind of thing, then VR is a great choice. Personally, I like the challenge that comes with VR, however, I don't think everyone does. The third thing also relates to brand new flight simmers. So usually when you're new to flight sim, you have kind of an average computer. Maybe you're a gamer and have a decent computer. However, when you fly in VR, in a flight sim, you usually need a beast of a computer. So VR flight, especially in its current state, requires a solid graphics card and a really good CPU. Much more than you need to run your average flight sim or game with a monitor. For me, in the past, I've run my sim with a GTX 1060, and now I'm running the 1080 Ti. The 1060 is a good solid graphics card for most computers, but this was a borderline graphics card for running VR flight sim. Now, flying a flight sim without VR is much more forgiving, and you can usually fly with the more average computer, depending on how picky you are with the visuals. VR can also be quite expensive. Not only do you need to buy a VR headset, which usually runs at a minimum of a few $100s, but you need that beefy computer with that powerful graphics card as well. For a computer of this power, usually it will run you around $2,000 or more. Alright, so I'm not trying to scare you out of flying in VR, as VR has some incredible upsides that can't be beat. We will get into that near the end of the video, but for now I'm kind of covering all the downsides. The next reason I have here is about clarity. So by this I mean that your visuals are not quite as clear as they would be when you're using a monitor. For example, a 4K monitor is going to be much better visually than you will have in any VR headset, even some of the higher resolution headsets. They are getting better, and there's some that are pretty high resolution. The one I've been using is Oculus Rift, and it is a little difficult to read some of the smaller gauges with this Oculus Rift. So I'm using the basic Oculus Rift. So that's not the newest Oculus Rift that's come out. So that version has some better clarity to it. So if you're looking at getting into VR, some of the newer headsets are a lot better for how crisp they are, and you can read the gauges. So if you're used to flying with a 4K monitor, you may be disappointed when you come to flying in VR. So now I would say those are probably some of the big reasons not to get into a VR flight sim. The biggest probably being that the cost of it is a lot, and the fact that you're going to have to play around with your settings probably constantly. Or at least as they do updates, every time they do an update, usually you have to tweak your settings a little bit as things get better or worse. and I also run in beta, so that causes me to have to do a lot more setting adjustments. But those are probably the bigger reasons. There are some other reasons that I'll point out here. A few others could be if you have big problems with motion sickness or hate the thought of having something strapped to your head while you're flying. Also, having to buy some controls is not something you necessarily need. However, I highly recommend controls like a Yoke and Rudder Pedal, which maybe you don't want to buy that right now. Maybe you just want to fly with a mouse and keyboard, and that's going to be difficult when you're flying in VR. VR does usually come with hand grips or controls, and those controls can be used to fly your flight sim, but they're not the best when it comes to flying in flight sim. I'd recommend having some physical controls that you can manipulate. It just makes life so much easier. So in the description I have my pedals and yoke, which are ones I would recommend if you're getting started. So on the flip side, there are many reasons to go into VR. The biggest and best reason is that you want to fly in VFR, which is visual flight rules. This is going to be the closest thing you will get to real world stick and rudder flight. Having that freedom of movement and being able to see things in 3D is incredible. I believe that this also has a lot of real world applications for new flight students. The only thing that you're missing is the actual feeling of the plane movement. But other than missing that movement, it gives you an incredible feeling of flight. So VR gives you that feeling that you're actually sitting inside the plane, seeing the size of this plane. So when you're flying a larger aircraft, you get that sense that this is a big plane. It's kind of a neat thing when you're sitting up in the front of a 747 and you look down and you can see how high you are off the ground. That kind of feeling is just something you wouldn't get on a monitor. There's also so much immersion in VR. For example, there are videos out there of people doing some pretty funny things in VR because they're standing on the edge of a building or about to crash their plane. And I've even had this with family members that tried the flight sim, and my yoke almost got pulled right off the desk because they were going too quick towards the ground because they didn't know how to fly, and they pulled back on the yoke, but now they were in a stall and they couldn't recover from the stall, so they pulled back harder, and my desk actually moved backwards with my yoke. It was pretty funny to see. Luckily my yoke survived the crash. So a quick side note about this reaction to crashing and pulling the yoke off the table. I just got an audio version of Rod Machado's book where he talks about this natural tendency for new pilots and flight sim pilots to have this very reaction when trying to come out of a stall. It's a funny reaction when watching someone fly a flight sim, however not so funny when they're in a real plane. Also with this side note, I wanted to give this book a quick plug because it has been an incredible read and listen. I bought both versions of the book. If you're new to flying in real life or flight sim, I highly recommend this book. Very entertaining and extremely informative. Plus he understands flight simulation since he was the instructor on Microsoft Flight Sim. Oh, and he has been flying planes for 50 years. If you're interested in this book, I'll leave a link in the description for it. It is an affiliate link, which means I earn a small commission if you use my link. This helps me to keep our content going. It helps VR Flight World to keep going, so I appreciate the support. I only recommend stuff that I believe in, and this book is definitely one of them. So back to VR. So this reaction on the flight yoke leads me into my next reason to fly VR. The immersion of VR allows you to practice the basics of flight without the unrealistic restrictions of a monitor. It gives you that ability to do scans before your stall practice and cross-check your instruments while keeping your eyes outside the plane. It helps to prevent the common problems that instructors see with flight students, where they tend to watch the instruments rather than watching outside the plane. So like I said above, the only thing it is lacking is that feeling of movement in the plane. Of course, there are some good reasons not to fly in VR. However, I truly believe that the reasons to fly in VR outweigh the downside. If you want to see a flight in VR, take a look at my flight I did with the Reality Expansion Pack Cessna 172. If you want to get straight into the VR part of the flight, fast forward to about 20 minutes. At that point, I continue the flight in VR. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video.